Welcome everyone to this conversation. My name is Jonathan Wilson, and I work with the organization Hen Harrier Action. It's a charity whose main objective is to broaden the awareness of the problems for nature in our uplands, particularly the illegal persecution of hen harriers. An important part of our work is to promote annual Hen Harrier Days around the UK with a view to inform about and celebrate the wildlife of the uplands and the challenges they face. Today's conversation is the first in a new series of conversations that Hen Harrier Action is running with leading figures in the nature conservation world to learn more about the different approaches for achieving environmental conservation progress and success. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Megan McCubbin, who is someone who has an unwavering passion for wildlife and conservation and a deep love of sharing her knowledge of the natural world with audiences around the world. Megan is a science communicator, presenter, writer, zoologist, and campaigner that many of you will recognize from her several television programs, most notably Spring Watch and Autumn Watch in the UK. She's a published author too, with books including Back to Nature, How to Love Life and Save It, and her latest book, An Atlas of Endangered Species, which seeks to highlight a range of species under threat from around the world and tell the stories of individuals and organizations fighting to save them. Megan, thank you for joining us today and welcome to this conversation.
Hello, very kind introduction. Thank you very much.
So, Megan, we're here to talk about your latest book, An Atlas of Endangered Species. But before we do that, I know you travel with work. Where do we find you in the world today?
I am currently in an annex in the Scottish Highlands, which is one of my favourite places. I've been spending a lot of time here over the last year, and it's become, kind of a second home to me. I spend a lot of my time up here. I work a lot down south, but I'm also spend a lot of my working time, whether I'm working from home or anything like that, I'm generally up in the Highlands at the minute.
Gosh, that sounds exciting. Is it a project you're involved in, or?
No, it's just, a lifestyle. It's just a case of being where the nature is, and we're really fortunate here to have a family of 4 badgers. We've got a male and female and 2 cubs that come in every night. We get pine marten, trying to make it regular. It's kind of, hit and miss. Occasionally we're treated to a visit, particularly a female that likes to come along. So we've got so much wildlife up here, and it's fantastic habitat to explore because of that biodiversity. It really is kind of a gem in terms of what's left in the UK. It's kind of a brilliant example of what can be achieved with the Cairngorms Connect project and so on, and lots of rewilding that's going on up here. Don't get me wrong, still a long way to go. It's still not perfect, but it's pretty much as wild as you can get within the UK. So I find myself nestled up here as often as I can be up here.
Sounds great, Megan. And I briefly spent a bit of time in the Highlands too, and I think if you haven't already tried with the pine martens, peanut butter, jam, and anything sweet, they're drawn to.
They absolutely are already on the case a lot of the time.
Good work.
So a lot of sunflower hearts and peanut butter here.
Fantastic. So turning to your latest book, Megan, in the introduction, you mentioned that this is a book about inspiring people doing inspiring things, trying to save some incredible and unique species. It'd be great if you could just unpack that a little bit and explore about why you decided to write this now.
I think when we're talking about climate change and the biodiversity crisis, it can feel incredibly overwhelming. And it looks like you're facing this big problem. And a lot of the time we feel that we're facing it alone as individuals, and what hope could what difference can I possibly make? What hope can I have with this? So it can feel quite isolating at times. We've been talking a lot about eco-anxiety in recent years, about kind of eco-fatigue, where we don't know what to do, so we become paralyzed with that worry and stress. And and we're all prone to it occasionally. It can sometimes all get a bit much, but my standpoint on it is very much that we are all, as individuals, incredibly lucky and incredibly powerful, you know, with our voices, with our, you know, the power in our pounds, so to put it. You know, we have some everyday choices that we can make that can really make that difference. And when we face problem like climate change and biodiversity loss together, then that problem becomes immediately a lot smaller, because all individual actions will tot up, and if we're all working towards the same common goal, then we will inevitably succeed. So, you know, when I came to writing this book, I love UK wildlife. Home is where the heart is, and all of that stuff. But I've also been very fortunate to travel and to see some amazing endangered species that are right on the brink, some of which people have never even heard about before. So I really wanted to bring attention to them, but also to the scientists, the rangers, the indigenous communities that are out there risking their life for the protection of these animals and plant, in case of one of the chapters, you know, every single day, and really trying their hardest to make that difference. And they are, in many cases, they are really succeeding, but they do need more support. And it's a case of empowering people by telling individual stories and say, well, look at what this person's doing. You know, Jonathan is a wonderful man who's saving frogs, you know, out in a cloud forest. And then you've got, you know, people like Punky, who's a Sumatran conservationist who's single-handedly saving orchids from plant poachers. You know, look at all these individual actions and how important they are. And if that's not empowering us to do something on our own ground, our own homes, then, you know, then I don't know what else will. You know, because there's really inspiring individuals out there, and we can learn a lot through international conservation, because, you know, it is really just one planet. I know we've created all these borders and a lot of paperwork and a lot of, you know, that area is yours, this area is mine, but actually we are one planet. We have, you know, one beautiful landmass, one beautiful ocean, and it is all interconnected with each other. So we can learn a lot from conservation in Asia, Africa, you know, South America, and we can feel hopeful about it, because there is a lot of hope to be had. There's a lot of important work going on, but we just got to recognize that.
That's great, Megan. And I really enjoyed the bit you talk about James Mwenda from the old Pajeha Conservancy in Kenya, with the rhino, and the story about how he was drawn into conservation. That spark, that moment that meant that conservation became a central part of his life.
Yeah.
I wondered, Megan, before we actually get into the different species you profiled, and some of the work that's going on there, I know you tried to make this book as accessible as possible for readers of all levels. I believe there's sort of quite a personal reason behind why you chose that approach. Do you want to maybe explore that a bit?
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm always very open and happy to talk about it. I wasn't necessarily particularly academically gifted at school, and it took a long time for me to recognize why, and recognize the fact that it wasn't me. I wasn't failing the school system. That's the wrong way to put it. I was quite average, but not very good at maths and science in certain areas. But I wasn't particularly academically gifted, shall we say. And it wasn't me that was kind of failing the school system. It was the school system that was failing me, because, you know, when we're young, we're taught in one way. We're expected to be examined with quiet rooms, pen and paper, questions. It's a very old school way of examining someone's skills and capabilities, and I would argue it's incredibly outdated. I don't suit exams. I'm much better practically, and if you're not taught the way that you learn, then you're ultimately set up to fail an exam which your brain isn't necessarily conditioned to you know, relay information to. So, you know, I had to really kind of learn why that was. And when I was 7 years old, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, and I mean, 1 in 10 people are. It's not particularly a, you know, a unique or unusual thing. You know, many people are dyslexic, and many people have the same struggles that I did, and we're still not talking about them anywhere near as much. So I had to learn how I learn best and reteach myself science. And funnily enough, I can do it, and I can actually do it, well, relatively well. I mean, I read a lot of science papers and things like that, which I would never have done going back. So yeah, it was quite a disheartening thing to be different and not understand why you're different and to be treated as such. And I don't want anyone to kind of go through that again, because I remember multiple times being handed a book or being asked to read out loud, and that was never good. I mean, I had a real phobia of books. Anyone would hand one to me, and I still get it to this day to some degree, just because of the conditioning of it, where someone will hand me a book and go, here you are. And I get lots of books. Lots of people very kindly send me their books, some amazing books. And sometimes I hold it and I open it up and my heart will sink, because the font isn't a font that I can easily read, or the style of it just isn't right. So I knew when writing this book, which was, first of all, a huge challenge for me personally, was that I wanted to make it as dyslexia friendly as possible. And it doesn't mean that I've written it in size 12 font, well, no, size 14, 15, 16 font. It's not big letters, big words. You wouldn't actually, looking at it, know that it's any different from any other book, but there are subtle changes in there, which mean that actually it is a lot more accessible for everyone. A lot of people without dyslexia that I know have said how much of an easier read it is. And of course, if you do have dyslexia, I hope, I mean, it's a spectrum, of course, there are people that, still might not apply to, but it should be a lot easier for people. It's certainly a lot easier for me when it came to kind of doing the audiobook and having to read it. But even, my nan, bless her, who reads on Kindle these days, she was able to, it's the first book she's actually been able to read on paper in a really long time. So it's just a more accessible book. The font style, the contrast of the colors, the spacing, everything has been kind of specifically designed for accessibility and dyslexic readers.
It's great to hear that perspective, Megan. And I should tell our audience that the book is adorned with these beautiful watercolor images of the different species, and it really does make for a very engaging, easy, and very well laid out read. Who did the illustrations, Megan?
It was Emily Robertson. She's very, very talented and super imaginative with how she kind of does things. It was all kind of done digitally. And yeah, she's remarkable. I don't know how she does it, to be honest, because a lot of the time, I mean, we're talking about very niche species. So for example, we're talking about northern white rhino just then. We had to make sure that the illustrations were of a northern white, not a southern white, and all this kind of stuff. So it was basically a lot to and forth, getting some reference photos, making sure everything's right, and off she went, and she came back with the most beautiful illustrations. And I really think they give a bit of life to the book, because there's some stories in there which are quite hard-hitting. There are some honest truths, I think, and some stuff that I think will it is very sad, but also some really brilliant, hopeful things. And I think actually Emily's work has really contrasted that really well by bringing some color, some kind of vibrancy to it, to make it kind of, these animals really stand out, and she's done that so well.
Yes, that was definitely my experience, I must say, when I first saw it. So diving into the book a little bit more, Megan, there's a very broad range of endangered species from Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere, from camels to glowworms, snow leopards to orchids, and surely the best named species, the exquisite spike thumb frog.
Yeah, I like that one.
How did you manage to choose only 20 species when you freely admit that so many are deserving of a voice and attention?
With great difficulty. It was really hard. I knew that I wanted to have species that spanned different areas of the world. I wanted it to be relatively evenly distributed. I knew that I wanted to have a couple mammals. I knew that fish needed to be represented. I wanted amphibians, I wanted insects, I wanted plants. So I knew that there was that kind of diversity that I wanted within. So that definitely helped me pinpoint exactly what's what. But in all honesty, what I did was I put a shout out on Twitter, and I said, because I wanted to learn through this process as well. I really wanted to learn more about species that I didn't know, because there's some really cool work being done on some really small islands with very niche species that I might not have heard of. And I wanted to kind of bring awareness to myself as well, and as readers, and get some surprising stories out there. So I put a shout out on Twitter, and I said, any scientists, rangers, or people, communities living alongside an endangered species that is globally classified as endangered. With the glowworm in the book is a bit of an exception, but there's a kind of reason for that. But yeah, so I just put the shout out, and I just wanted to see who was out there, and I got, you know, so many different responses. That's how I learned about wild camels, which was perhaps for me the most surprising chapter. Jonathan Colby, who's the, you know, fantastic researcher with the exquisite spiked thumb frog, got in touch. So yeah, lots of different people. The sunflower sea star, that was also one that I, you know, didn't really know much about, with Sarah, which was great. So yeah, I mean, I've got to meet all these scientists from all over the world who just were willing to give me their time and share their knowledge and share their stories. And it's really kind of an anthology of their stories and their words, and, you know, kind of backed up with a bit of, you know, science and history of the issues that they're facing. And I think one thing that was important for me, you know, for example, I've got Asian elephant in there as well as hammerhead shark. Now, the issues that most people would jump to with those two species would be the shark fin trade and you know, ivory poaching. And I could have done that, and I, you know, and that's very relevant and still incredibly important, but I wanted to bring to light new stories, which is why, for example, the hammerhead sharks, we talk about recreational fishing off the coast of Florida being incredibly damaging for this really, you know, important population. And then we also talk about elephant skin beads and how, you know, the elephants are literally being skinned for jewelry in Myanmar. So yeah, I wanted to do some surprising stuff that people might not have heard of, even if they were the species that would be very familiar.
I must say I learned a lot, though both of those issues were very new to me, and I think you're right. The more we can spread that message, that of these more unfamiliar areas where these species are facing challenge, the faster we can get on top of dealing with them. I wondered, Megan, I read that you held your interviews with the scientists and others, many over Zoom, or like we're now doing, or video call. How did that work as an exercise to get a feel for the conservation action and the stories you wanted to tell? Did you get a better insight? Was it harder? How did it work?
Yeah, I mean, selfishly, obviously, I would have loved to have flown around the world and seen all these projects firsthand and to see some of the animals. Obviously, not brilliant for the climate, so it's not necessarily something I would do for it, considering how many trips I would have had to have taken. So I didn't really want that kind of you know, carbon footprint on my conscience from that. So there was that element of it, but there's also the fact that I started writing this in lockdown. Lockdown was kind of just easing off, but there was still some light travel restrictions. So, you know, travel was incredibly hard, but it was also great just to kind of talk to people because they were in their offices, they were in their own homes. You know, I was talking to Punky, who's the Sumatran conservationist out doing orchid work. You know, he was in the middle of a greenhouse in the middle of the Sumatran jungle. You know, so it was bonkers and surreal and everything, but it was really great to connect to them. I mean, I speak to a few of them still. You know, it was really nice to kind of get to know them and get their work. And I mean, we had a few chats with all of them, and it was yeah, very insightful and a really good way of delving into it. And throughout the writing process, I, you know, went back to them and said, you know, are you happy with the way that I've told this angle of the story? Are you comfortable with this? So it was very much, you know, a big collaboration. I've got a lot to thank them for giving me their time and expertise. But yeah, Zoom worked great. I mean, why not? Why not? If we can limit our carbon footprint and do things from home when we can, then we absolutely should.
Yeah, certainly from reading the different chapters, it does feel as if you were there in person, you know, seeing the environment, and so clearly it worked well for you. A question, I think you've touched upon this already, Megan, but as you mentioned, when addressing the topic of endangered species, and we encounter this with hen harrier persecution as well, it's quite a heavy subject, can feel overwhelming. And so how do you balance as a writer, and even more broadly as a presenter, the need for conveying urgency and the seriousness of the situation, whilst also providing some hope, and the action and solutions are possible?
I think you've just said the word there. It's the solutions that are the most important bit. You know, we need to be honest and open, talking about the issues that our planet and its biodiversity is facing. We need to be upfront and sometimes quite black and white about what needs to be done to save our planet, because of the situation we've got ourselves in and the time frame that we're looking at to sort this mess out. But the key there is providing the solutions. You know, what can people do? You know, and I think, you know, I'm asked all the time, what can people do? And I say frequently, you know, well, you know, we can make our gardens wilder, we can leave a corner to get a bit overgrown, put in a hedgehog highway, do all those kind of things, which are fantastic, really good. Please, everyone should be doing that. But I think we're coming to this crux point where the most important thing we can all do is use our voices, and we have to recognize actually how important our voices are. You know, we should be emailing our representatives, our MPs, you know, asking them for the change that we want to see. We should be turning up for nature and doing a lot more, and getting comfortable with the word that some people, you know, well, it's a word that's been demonized a lot, and I think we should kind of be trying to reclaim it, but getting comfortable in activism. I you know, I wear the activist badge, you know, with honor. I'm proud to be an activist. I wouldn't want to be anything else, because it means that I'm trying to make a difference in my environment. And whether and activism can mean different things to different people. So, you know, putting Hedgehog Highway could be a form of community activism, you know, or you could go on a protest or write to your MP. Activism can be what you want it to mean. And I think by providing these solutions, giving people the avenues to use their voice and teaching them to be comfortable and confident in talking about the changes they want to see is half the battle. Because if we get people to stand up and be counted, then that's when we're going to see some big change.
Some wise words, I think, there for us all. Some readers will find that the final chapter is dedicated to us, humans, and endangered species. You say that, will we be the animals that consciously destroyed the planet as we know it, or the ones that learned from our mistakes and managed to turn it around? So, from your observation throughout the book, the solutions and the challenges that other species have faced, what do you think? What's your take on that question that you pose at the end? It's an impossible question, I know, but where do you think we're at?
Well, humans are very good at being reactive. We're not very good at being proactive. So I think it will hit a point where we will wake up. I mean, many of us are already awake and trying to shout and ring the alarm bells, but it will become a point where, you know, the people making the policies, the people sitting in the big CEO positions that are pumping fossil fuels out at an extraordinary rate will wake up to it and think, oh God, we've got to do something now, because it will affect me and my children and certainly their children. So yeah, you know, something will happen where we will spin around and get on with implementing the solutions, because we've got the solutions, we've had them for years. Climate scientists have been ready for these solutions for a long time. Like, we know exactly what to do. We're just not given the power or, you know, the resources to be able to do it, or the trust even to be able to do it. So we will get to that point. It's just whether we will get to that point when it's too late or not. We've already, you know, had incredible weather this summer. It's been the hottest June on record, and that isn't necessarily like the hottest days. We haven't had necessarily like really hot 40-degree weather in June, but it is the average over the month has been incredibly warm. So we're seeing these changes all the time. It's just when, you know, we'll think of, you know, when the switch will be from, oh God, this is nice warm weather, we can go to the beach and have an ice cream, to, oh, this is hot and life-threatening. It's when that switch will happen, and it will happen quickly. So, you know, when it comes to kind of the bigger idea of hope, yeah, I have to be hopeful. I think we will turn it around. It's just how many species we will lose in the process, and that all depends on how quickly we wake up to it.
That's great. It would be amiss of me if I didn't ask a question as it concerns hen harriers, and perhaps if your book was called a UK Atlas of Endangered Species, some would argue that the hen harrier should and would be included. A scientist estimate, as you know, that the UK has enough suitable habitat to support 2,000 600 pairs of hen harrier, and at the last national survey carried out in 2016, only 545 were recorded. So again, in light of some of the solutions you have learned and garnered from the different approaches to tackling the endangered species in your book, are there any new strategies, ideas, concepts that hen harrier conservation it could follow or should follow, do you think?
Yeah, but again, it relates to kind of climate scientists when I said earlier that they've had the solutions for a long time. We know the solution to saving our hen harriers is to ban driven grouse shooting. It's as simple as that. You know, we can beat around the bush for as long as we want, but until that is banned, then we are, you know, we're still going to see that conflict between predators of all kinds, you know, which are fundamental to the health of an ecosystem, being shot, poisoned, you know, and put in awful stink traps and goodness knows what else. You know, it's a really unbalanced, you know, practice. I can't call it a sport. I don't have it quite within me to call it a sport. I know some do, but you know, it creates this unbalanced life. You know, we're putting out millions of non-native birds, you know, pheasants and grouse into our UK countryside, and not really having a non-biased review on how that would impact our native wildlife. I mean, hello, like, why is that not happening on a wider level, kind of annually? Yeah, I mean, the thing for hen harriers, we've got to take out what is, you know, ultimately causing them to perish. We've got to, you know, we've got to see you know, a ban of driven grouse shooting ultimately.
Thanks, Megan. And I'm sure many of our audience would subscribe to that view. And I think, just turning back to your book more briefly, there's a great variety of solutions that do exist, and as you say, it also goes beyond facts, figures, and numbers into the human spirit and courage and bravery to raise our collective voice for change as well. And that's something we're trying to do at Hen Harrier. And I know that's something that you do in your very different and very various roles and your work. So thank you for sharing the insights into your writing your book, available from all good bookstores, online and audiobook as well.
Yes, audiobook is there. That took me a little while because I had to read it on the page. That took me a bit longer than most authors, but it's there. I did it.
Fantastic. Well, our audience can check that out, and the link will be made available in the description as well. Megan, thanks very much for joining us today.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Dance with me, my ghost in grey. Our end is close most every day. Blue grey circle.